This morning, we begin in Edinburgh, Scotland, where Queen Elizabeth II is lying at rest. Just minutes ago, a procession brought her coffin from Holyrood House, that's the official royal residence in Edinburgh, to St. Giles Cathedral. King Charles and other royals took part in this procession. On Saturday, Charles III was officially proclaimed king during a very ornate ceremony at St. James's Palace in London. That ceremony was repeated yesterday in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, the other nations of the United Kingdom. And this morning, Prince Harry released his first public statement about his grandmother, who he lovingly calls Granny. We'll have more on that in just a moment. Right now, CBS Evening News anchor and managing editor, that of course is Norah O'Donnell, is leading our coverage from London. She's outside Buckingham Palace, along with a huge crowd of mourners. Norah, good morning. The crowd keeps growing and growing. Good to see you.
Oh, my goodness, Gayle, you should see it. It's unbelievable, the amount of people that have come to pay their respects and will continue to for the next following days. It's already been a busy day here in London. We've now seen the King several times, of course, in Scotland, as you just referenced, and there's a lot of new details about what's to come. The Queen will remain at St. Giles Cathedral overnight, and members of the public will be allowed in to pay their respects, starting about an hour from now. That follows the very elaborate and carefully planned procession with the new king. You'll remember the Queen died at her home in Scotland, a place she loved so dearly, and that is why this week-long series of events leading up to next week's funeral began there. Elizabeth Palmer's at the royal residence in Edinburgh. Elizabeth, good morning.
This is the first day that members of the public will be able to file past the Queen's coffin to pay their respects. It's just one component and a very complex series of rites associated with the funeral and also the transition to the new monarch. In London this morning, the new King Charles III met members of the House of Commons and the House of Lords.
It is a loss to all of us, but we know, most of all, it is a loss to you, Your Majesty, and to the royal family.
He accepted their condolences in Westminster Hall, the room where his mother's body will lie in state later in the week. Afterwards, King Charles set off to Edinburgh, where he and members of the royal family followed the Queen's coffin to the cathedral in a solemn procession along the historic road known as the Royal Mile. Yesterday, he was proclaimed king here in Scotland.
That the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George is now, by the death of our late sovereign, happy of memory, become our only lawful and rightful liege lord, Charles III. God save the King!
Just over 24 hours ago, the Queen's hearse left Balmoral, her private country estate, the coffin draped in the Scottish standard flag. The procession wound its way through the Scottish countryside, well-wishers lining the route on horseback and even in tractors to say goodbye. By late afternoon, crowds had packed the streets of the capital to pay their respects.
I think it's just important to be here, just important to say goodbye.
What was so remarkable about her?
Well, she started at a really young age and she did do a lot of impact, and now that she's going to be gone, it's going to be different. It's never going to be the same again.
Quite speechless, actually. She was a lovely lady. Great mother, grandmother, and she did well.
The Queen was connected to the Scottish people not only as their sovereign but also as their countrywoman. She herself was descended from Scottish kings. Yesterday afternoon, 3 of the Queen's children, Princess Anne and Princes Andrew and Edward, were waiting at the door as their mother arrived at Holyrood House for the last time. As we saw, the Queen's body left Holyrood House, the royal residence, a short time ago. She will lie at rest in St. Giles's Cathedral until tomorrow. And after a religious ceremony today, the royal family will hold a formal vigil over the body. Norah?
Elizabeth Palmer in Edinburgh for us. Thank you.